Hi, and welcome to the Law Simplified, the world's largest independent online law school platform. I'm your instructor, Shaveen Bandadnaika. This may turn out to be a much longer video than the usual type that I make. And the reason for that is because over the past several years, and little over a decade really, of teaching law, 34 modules at that, from an academic component as well as a vocational one, I have had the privilege of speaking to students from all walks of life. I've had the opportunity to educate students who have just left school and was interested in joining the legal fraternity, went through the grind, their academics, their vocational components, pupillage, and now are practicing solicitors and barristers in different jurisdictions. I've also had mid-career professionals who've approached me at a pivotal time in their careers where they understood the value of pursuing a law degree either as a supplement to what they're currently doing or to completely pivot into the legal fraternity altogether. Most of those who have pivoted have now become successful solicitors, barristers, and in some instances even arbitrators, going into a very niche, specialized area of law based on their previous qualification and vocation. On a handful of occasions, I've also had students who've approached me later on in their lives. They've retired, they've been in completely different vocations, completely different professions altogether, but I've always been passionate about the law and have gotten the time now essentially to pursue a law degree, not necessarily to practice thereafter, but just as a fulfillment in terms of their bucket list of life, so to speak. In all three instances, whether it is someone who is career focused at the very inception, knows exactly what they want to get into, a mid-career professional who has understood the value of law and is interested in pivoting, or someone who is pursuing it as a passion because they've always wanted to do law but never had the opportunity. There's one dynamic that strings together all three classes of persons: planning. If you like the type of content that I make on this YouTube channel, do subscribe to the Law Simplified and leave a comment below of what other types of videos that you'd like to see, whether it's academic or professional. If you are a student that's currently pursuing a law degree, in whichever class of persons you fall into, I would highly recommend the comprehensive online law school platform, complete with theory, tutorial, and workshop lessons based on the actual one-on-ones that I've conducted with first-class law students globally. What I mean by planning, really, is to understand the time, effort, and commitment that's required for a law degree. For the most part, depending on the jurisdiction, you might actually have to have some other qualification behind you prior to being allowed to take a law degree. This is true when it comes to the US, Australia, and certain other jurisdictions that might actually not have a Bachelor of Laws as the first qualification in law, but a Juris Doctor or a JD. On the one hand, this does make a lot of sense. And the reason for that is because a law degree is very different to any other qualification that you might be accustomed to. It's much more subjective. There's very little in terms of technical know-how that they're testing you on. And it's really about how you think as opposed to what you know. Now, for those of you who have been a student of mine, either through simply going through these YouTube videos, enrolling in the pre-recorded comprehensive courses on the online law school platform, or if I've had an opportunity to interact with you in either my fast track or masterclass programs over the past several years, you'd know that the aspect of law that is quite different and is a juxtaposition to every other qualification is how black box it is in terms of the outcome. What do I mean by this? For those of you who are new to law, one thing that's going to hit you like a ton of bricks at least at the very beginning, is how exactly the spectrum is set up in terms of your effort to return. When you do a technical subject, it can be management, engineering, accounting, marketing even for that matter, you'd have an expectation based on the rubric that's set out for you by your institution or university. The understanding that there is a requisite threshold to achieve if you want to pass a particular module or if you want to ace a particular module. And if you're someone who is tenacious and a go-getter, going through that fine print makes it very easy for you to score well. In law, whilst it is not very different to that aspect, there are circumstances in which there is a subjective component to the marking. What I mean by this is modules like public law, administrative law, jurisprudence for that matter, has a very distinct requirement in which you might not necessarily immediately know what your examiner wants from you. Now, this might seem quite haphazard and arbitrary, but the goal is to be able to understand what the requirement is based on the institution or the university that you're enrolled in. This is why I mentioned that this particular degree requires the commitment of time, of effort, and the respect of putting your whole heart, mind, body, and soul into it. You ask any law student, one of the common denominators among any class of persons who's doing law is how frustrating it can sometimes be when you don't get the return for the effort that you're putting in. So, to circle back to what I started this video with, the importance of planning, irrespective of which class of student you fall into. Most students feel that going into a law degree, it's very overwhelming, primarily because the material or the content that's provided to you at the very beginning of a course can seem very daunting. Now, in the first year, this is something, as I mentioned earlier, that's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. Planning makes sense in the context of preparing well in advance. Most universities and institutions might not necessarily provide you with the content or the material for you to have a look through more than a week before the actual commencement of the course. Whilst personally I disagree with this mantra, I think it's mostly due to the fact that they do want you to parallel your studies with the guided techniques that they are professing. Irrespective of how these institutions tend to do, it's up to you as someone who is proactive to determine what sources that you can go through prior to this. So for example, if you're given a reading list by your university, it need not even be at the time of enrollment. Most university websites will actually guide you to what content is actually going to be covered and what textbooks are actually required for that particular module. So if you are someone who is relatively proactive in your efforts, you would actually go on and find those material prior to commencement altogether, just to get a leg up. This is even more so evident when you go to deeper modules. So later on, when you do in your second or third years, modules like property law, trust law, or fairly heavy or bulky electives like intellectual property, it's very important for you to go beyond just the subject matter and have an understanding from a practical perspective. Now, the reason why I'm stressing on the academic component, on planning, on getting as much content and material prior to even commencement, and to read through the fine print, for example, to understand what your university requires for you to achieve not just a pass but an ace in terms of your assignments and examinations, is because this is the foundation that you're going to build your career on. On a number of different occasions on this YouTube channel, I've tried to stress on the importance of building your persona in law, to have that personality of someone who is not just going through the material and going through the motions of writing an examination and passing it, but to have a deeper understanding of the law, appreciating it, and loving what you do. That passion is going to come through later on in your vocation, especially if you're someone that falls into the first class of persons that I mentioned. Those who have left school or those who have just gotten into a law degree, and have aspirations of becoming a solicitor or barrister. Even if you're a mid-career professional, someone who falls into the second class of persons that's trying to pivot into something else, whilst there's a lot that you can bring in from your current vocation, the law will kind of spin you around and put you on your toes in terms of understanding the world in a much different way. So you have to be careful in terms of how you set yourself up at that very inception of your law degree. And as a mid-career professional, yes, it might not be as easy as someone who's just jumping into the fray as a 20-something-year-old. Right. So having gone through your academics as well as you possibly can, and when I say that, I mean it with a lot of context and with a lot of thought behind it, because as well as you can means you've put in the effort, you've put in the time, and you've put in the commitment in terms of your respect for the qualification. Hopefully you have achieved the grade and the grade classification rather, that is going to really keep you a step above, so to speak, than everyone else who's pursued this qualification. If you're serious about law, you have to treat it like a sport. You have to have tactics, you have to have strategy, you have to know what subjects you're selecting, you have to project where you're trying to take this law degree and where you're trying to go from a career perspective. And that is the most important part, really, when you're deciding to enter this profession. Now, for a number of my students, even before they start their law degree, they've dropped me an email or a WhatsApp, and we've had consultations on figuring out where you ought to be, because there are a number of decisions that may be relevant to you looking at your personality and temperament as well, starting from the selection of the university, determining what courses they offer and how it retroactively benefits you from the perspective, for example, if you're a mid-career professional, on the modules that you've already done academically in the area that you were proficient in, be it management, accounting, engineering, or even medicine for that matter. Understanding how assessments are conducted, because some students, they're not good at being examined from a very timed-based setup, like a 3-hour paper, for example. Then we need to determine what institution or university fits your temperament. There are institutions that have examinations, yes, but are assessed at a relatively smaller percentage, something like 20% of the overall module. Something like that might benefit you more. Having said that, we have to cross-reference that, for instance, to determine how those courses are structured, and if you're intending to enter into the profession, whether they provide unique tethers with the industry so that you get an opportunity in your final year, for example, to intern or be an apprentice at a firm, whereby you have a better opportunity to then transition from the academics to the vocational component and the pupillage component of your legal career. If you'd like to set up a consultation or a session, or even a fast track for that matter, to get a bird's eye picture of what you're essentially getting yourself into, be it whether you're a school leaver, a mid-career professional, or just someone who has gone into retirement and enjoys or would like to enjoy the benefit of knowing the law, do drop a message. The links in the description will indicate my email as well as WhatsApp, and I'd be happy to go through and help you out. Right. The reason for this video was because I see a lot of unfortunate circumstances befall on students, predominantly because they've lacked planning and preparation well before getting into a particular qualification. The one constant that I have had to face with a lot of my fast track and masterclass students as well is regret. And regret in the context of having not paid enough attention before enrolling or signing up in a particular university, finding out that there's a much better option considering their own temperament and future aspirations. So it's always good to have preparation in place, planning in place, and understanding what you're getting yourself into prior to anything else. So the next time someone suggests to you a university, the next time someone says, hey, follow this course of action, always remember to do your own research, to make sure that you go through it and do your due diligence. And if you need help, dropping me a line as well along the way. That being said, until the next time that we speak, have fun, stay safe, and as always, obey the law.